Hello and welcome to Future Self Dreaming. My name is Carlos Kukulkan. So I'm going to just rant today, freestyle. I've just got off a conversation with a client, and I often have these conversations with clients or friends, people that might come and drink tea with me, and I wish that I had the conversation that we were having recorded, because it feels inspiring and it feels like something that I would want to share with a greater audience, but that's not always possible, and sometimes there's just the magic of what takes place. But this particular session this morning, as I take notes as I'm tracking what's happening for somebody's inner world, and it often feels like there's an activation of our higher selves that takes place. And this was, largely the theme that was presenting itself in today's session, and something that I'm familiar with and really grateful for when doing sessions with people, because there is a sort of a merging that takes place, and that saying that the sum or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts often comes to mind. Is that when my experience has been that when what I would term psychedelic personalities come together, that there's something greater takes place, and we tap into what might be called our higher selves or our transcendent oversoul, or some sort of language that's describing a merging with the creative intelligence. What my client a moment ago describes as source expressing itself through us. And many people that have, all of us to some degree, but particularly artists that have some expression, whether it be playing an instrument or dancing or painting, anything that allows that creative expression to come through us. We act as a channel and a conduit. And I guess the more that we practice that art of expressing source through ourselves, the more capacity that we have for being able to tap into that. As I was talking to my client, I was remembering, certain times that I've had in my life with various people. One man in particular, when I was in my early 20s, who acted as a friend but spiritual mentor and healer with me. I would have conversations in his backyard, just drinking tea, and I would come away from those conversations, feeling inspired and expanded, and like I wanted to share, the conversation that we were having with other people. But it was a little bit like a dream, in that the significance of that dreaming awareness would fade quite quickly, and I'd come away from it knowing that something profound had taken place, but I couldn't really tap back into that to be able to share it with other people. And there's been many times that has happened, and I like friends or going to environments where I know there's going to be people that are tapped into that, and that will awaken or spark that within myself. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine in Melbourne one time that was before I had taken any type of psychedelic substance, and he was quite familiar with those substances, and we were having quite profound conversation. We were sharing experiences that we both had that were quite transcendental, and there was something that he was sharing, and at a very poignant, significant moment, all of a sudden he had a fireplace in his lounge room, just spontaneously burst into flames. And that fire, it had obviously been smouldering for a couple of days. He said that it hadn't been lit for a couple of days. There was perhaps some embers that had been left from the last fire that he had, but it was just so poignant at the particular point that we're at in the conversation, where all of a sudden this fire ignited itself, and we both looked at it and sort of acknowledged that the magic of that moment, as though, well, it has been my experience that the elements respond to us. They respond to perhaps the emotional frequency that we are giving off, and these, again, synchronistic, magical, miraculous experiences like that happen. They perhaps can be hard to convey verbally alone, but many of you listening to this will have had those types of experiences that affirm this. And so in talking to this client, as we were discussing how this happens, as two or more people come together and our consciousnesses expand into something greater. The lineage of shamans that I have spoke about my connection with previously in other talks, from Carlos Castaneda's lineage, from the Yaqui Indian sorcerers or the Toltec shamans. They describe what they refer to as the higher self. They call it the Nawal, and they had various energetic procedures for being able to tap into that aspect of themselves. They called our everyday awareness that our ego operates in the realm of the tonal, and the expanded sense of self was the nawal. And an experienced shaman, somebody with more energy, was able to shift apprentices their perceptual point by giving them an energetic blow that would shift their awareness into their nawal, and that would last for a period of time, and then they would find themselves back in their usual everyday awareness. And there were various energetic trainings that they did, like qigong practices for building energy in the body, and the use of power plants or psychedelic medicines for shifting the perception into the realm of the nawal, or the higher self. And it's been my experience that we might access these reference points at various points in our life, and again, they might fade like a dream, but they're a reference point that allows us access to return to that state. My little sharing about that experience of the fire spontaneously combusting during my conversation, when I did a shamanic men's training back in my 20s, the significance of our relationship to the elements really took a leap at that time. As part of this training, we were in a teepee with about 35 men, and one of the guys who was leading that group selected me initially to be the firekeeper, and my experience with that role was, not just keeping the fire going, but being attentive to what the fire was showing us, as members of that group would be, again, sharing something particularly significant, the play of light and shadow that was given off by the fire, and various pops or crackles or sounds that the fire would give off, was as though it was making our awareness of these significant moments, was bringing our awareness really into the moment through communing with that element. I'm just looking at my notes here as I'm talking, because again, I'm just trying to stay tapped into the frequency of what was shared, and some of the themes that were shared in this session that I've just come out of with a client. We were talking in the session about the way that we can come together as two or more and access an expanded state of consciousness. And my experience of that has also been of integrating parts of ourselves, that when two or more parts that may have been in conflict or operating not in healthy relationship with one another, as there is an acceptance and a relationship formed and recognition of those parts, is that we often access an expanded state of consciousness. For those people who are familiar with the process of shamanic ceremony and the use of psychedelic plants, that is often an encounter as well within that ceremony, that we navigate through unconscious terrain or territory and encounter parts of ourselves that need integration. And as a result of that integration, we may encounter an expanded galactic cosmic sense of ourselves that we're not accustomed to, embodying or dealing with 24/7. But again, it gives us a reference point for this expanded state. It's one of the reasons that I particularly enjoy attending some of the festivals that we have access to nowadays. In particular, Burning Man obviously is a reference point for that, but in Australia, a fantastic festival called Earth Frequency. I've been meaning to give a presentation, about some of my encounters with experiences at these festivals, which I might do after giving this one. But there's oftentimes many people that attend those festivals that have these reference points for expanded states of consciousness, and as we commune together at those, as a big communal ceremony that unfolds, and it's much easier to access these cosmic states of consciousness because of the presence of many other people that are holding that frequency. Anyway, there's probably much more that I could say on this particular topic. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, and I'm just rambling. But yeah, hopefully, again, as usual, you might have taken something from this, might be inspiring to you in one way or another. And for anyone who's interested in counselling sessions, you can visit the website futureselfdreaming.com. And have a great day in Lakesh.